Listen. Okay, that's not too bad. Great. So for those of you guys who read the emails, you probably saw that tonight we're going to be talking about legacy and having it where your life, where you outlive your life. Kind of sounds real crazy, but we're going to really kind of get into that tonight because your life has meaning. Like your life has purpose. Like God is not, his purpose is not just to benefit you, but more importantly, he wants to use you to benefit somebody else. He wants to use you to reach somebody else, whether that's your family, whether that's your roommate, whether that's your coworker, whether that's your boo, whether that's your mom, whether it's your dad. Like God wants to use you to make an impact on the lives of other people. So we're going to really kind of be talking about that tonight, and then also even for the next few weeks of leaving a legacy and how important it is to leave a legacy. But before I kind of get into that, last semester, some of you guys remember who were here, you remember that I kind of shared what God has called us to do, my wife and I to do, along with a few great other people, and that is to start a church and plant a church in Hampton. I think we announced that last October, or November rather. And I didn't really kind of speak on it at all for the rest of the semester because I wanted to really kind of make sure things were progressing to be able to come and share even more about that. So tonight, I really wanted to kind of spend just a few minutes before I got into the message just kind of talking about it because it has everything to do with what we're talking about tonight. It has everything to do with focus. So for those of you guys who don't know, we're planting a church in Hampton. What that simply means is that's code word for like we're starting a church. So some of you guys like plant, how do you plant a church? It means start a church. That's pretty much essentially what it means. But the reason why we say plant a church is because we believe in as you plant a tree, you don't start a tree, right? Like you talk about planting a tree. So whether it's planting a seed or whether it's actually planting a tree that's already in existence and planting it or replanting it in a certain place and letting it grow. So you water it, you give it sunlight, you give it all the things that it needs in order for it to grow. And so we wholeheartedly believe not just in starting a church, but in planting the church, because we believe that God has called us to not only start this church, plant this church, but that God wants to build his church. Like this is his church. It's not my church, it's not anybody else's church. It is his church, the church that you may be a part of right now. That is not your pastor's church. That is the Lord's church. Want me to tell you why? Because when your pastor dies, who's going to be there? The Lord. Right? Rightfully so. It's his bride. Right? I hope this isn't foreign to some people. But nonetheless, like it's the Lord's church. This is his thing. Jesus calls the church his bride. In other words, this is his boo. He's going to make sure his boo is right. Right? Does this kind of make sense? Right? That's what that's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians and even talks about that in Ephesians. And so God's called us to plant this church in Hampton. And so the vision is, our vision is very simple. Like it's very, very simple. Like, you know, you go to a lot of organizations and you ask them like, what's the purpose statement of your organization, right? They can't articulate it. Or better yet, you'll go from person to person and everybody will say something completely different. Because it's really kind of confusing or it's murky. Our church, the vision that God has given us for the church is to see people reconciled to God and become followers of Christ. That's it. It's that simple. To see people reconciled, which simply means to be put in a right relationship with God and to set in order with God and to see them become followers of Christ. So it's not just enough for me to be like, I love God, I believe in what Jesus did for me, I believe that he died for my sins on the cross, I believe that God raised him from the dead in 3 days. It's not enough just to believe that. That's good, that's part one. But because you believe that, now put that faith in work. Follow Christ. I hope that makes sense. So I'm reconciled to God so I can follow Christ. That's what it means to be a true disciple. Now, there's a difference between like a disciple and just a church person. Church person just shows up to church. A disciple is one who actually follows. Like he is my model. Like I want to live my life like Christ. The reason why I want to live my life like Christ is because he sacrificed his life so I could have life. That's what it's about. And so that's the vision for our church. So hence the bridge church. When you think of the bridge, what do you think of? Something that connects one thing to the next. But without that bridge, the connection couldn't happen. Oh, don't that sound like Jesus? John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody gets to the Father except through me, right? That's the whole thing. So Jesus is the bridge. Hope that makes sense. Bridge church, if we would rename it and just wanted to be like super duper spiritual and like these like corny Christians, we would call it the Jesus church. I don't really know, like for marketing purposes, how that would go over with people. Some of y'all like, call it the Jesus church. Who cares what people think? I understand. But at the same time, you got to speak in today's language. So that's why Jesus will speak in parables when he speak to people, so that way they would get the message of the kingdom in a way that they can understand. So we say the bridge church, because who doesn't know what a bridge is? Most people know what a bridge is. Most of the people who drove here tonight, you probably came over a bridge somewhere. Or you've been over a bridge at some point, right? right? Some of you guys who live in Northern Virginia, you live in Hampton, you live in Richmond, you have to cross a bridge to get there. Without the bridge, you can't get there, right? So it connects you, it points you, it directs you to a certain place. And so that's essentially what we believe the church is supposed to be. A place that reconciles, a community that reconciles people to God. And now leads them into an authentic relationship with Christ. Awesome. Now, for me personally, I had no idea that this was going to be like God's plan for our life. Like if you'd have told me 2 years ago that God was going to call us to plant a church, I'd have been like, you are a liar and you are a false prophet and the Lord is not like you or something crazy. I don't know. But I wholeheartedly believe it now. And so, some of you guys who are like, okay, whatever, just get on to the message. I want to tell you how serious this is. We believe in this so much that, like at the end of December, I quit my job to focus on this full time. Now, I don't know how much serious you get, how much more serious you can get than to like leave everything. I'm talking about leave a good paying job, a good salary, leave benefits. Mind you, I'm married, I have a child. So now our household has gone from 2 incomes to 1. Now that can cause some serious friction in the household if you ain't careful. Your boo come home and be like, yo, I quit my job. What? We got bills to pay. You better go out there and wash some cars or something. Right? But I thank God for my wife because this has been something that God has been working into both of us and we've been walking side by side. Now the great thing about God is God has provided and we actually saved some money because we knew where God was leading us, so we saved some money. And God has put us in a position where I don't have to get a job, where I can focus strictly just on the church. And you want to talk about a blessing? That is a blessing. To know that I don't have to try to go get a job, support the family at the same time that I'm trying to focus on the church. Now my time is really divided. You know what I'm saying? Some of you guys may come from churches or backgrounds where your pastor works an actual 9-to-5 job and then he has to come there and teach and preach and now meet with people. That's a tough deal right there. Like I wholeheartedly believe every pastor who is actually called by God to shepherd the church, that should be the only thing that they should have to focus on. Matter of fact, Paul says like this in 1 Timothy 5, that the man who is preaching and teaching, the one who's leading the flock, they're worth double honor because their commitment is to the church. It's to make sure that you can have somebody bury your family when your relatives, when they pass away. That when you all get love struck and you're like, oh, my boo, we need to get married, that there's somebody there who can facilitate that. That when it comes to preaching on Sunday morning, it's like you don't have to worry about coming to a place and there's no word from the Lord. That's a serious ordeal. And mind you, that's not just for one person. That's just not just for you. Imagine that now with a church full of 200-300 people, 400 people, 1,000 people, 2,000 people. Anybody who says that pastors are some of the laziest people and are like not worth anything are misguided. Like, I mean, there's so much work that goes into it. But God is so faithful and responding and blessing because of it. And this is why it's ultimately needed. And so when God called us to plant this church, man, at the end of last year, we had no clue how it was going to look. We didn't know like what was going to happen. And then God, little by little, just continued to add and add and add. He sent people who wanted to be a part. He sent people just to bless us financially out of nowhere. The church network that we're planting under, because you got to have covering, I wholeheartedly believe it. So our network called ARC, like we went to Alabama, which is where the network is based, to get trainers for a whole week. That trip cost about $3,000. We didn't have to pay a single dime. That is a blessing, being I just quit my job in December, right? Like God just provides. Like when you are in the will of God and when you're pursuing God, trust and believe that God will provide. So if anybody would have asked me like, yo, are you really serious about this thing? Yeah, how serious? I quit my job. Like I don't get a paycheck anymore. I was working for 6 years at a church, right? Comfortable. I love my church. My church, Abyssinia Baptist Church, I was youth pastor. I love the church, man. I love all the people there. And it pained me to even have to be like, yo, this is what God's calling us to do, man. But I got to be obedient. We got to be obedient. We got to pursue it. And God has provided ever since, man. And so I said all that to say, whatever God has placed on your hearts is pivotal for you to be able to impact other people. Some of us are waiting for God to give us all the dots so we can make the decision. God does not work like that. He says, I'm going to tell you the what, and I need you to trust me. So God was like, plant a church. Okay, wow. So what now? I'm not going to tell you. It's like God likes to play hide and seek with us. You know, it's like, I'm not going to tell you, let's have fun. You call this fun, Lord? This is my life here. You know, it's cold outside. I'm not trying to be outside. You know what I'm saying? But following Jesus, man, is the best thing that you could ever do in your whole entire life. And so the reason why this is huge when it comes to focus is because the vision of focus has always been, when I started the campus ministry, like when I was a student here, the vision was always that focus would be covered and connected to a church. Like, in other words, focus would be like the campus extension of a church. And I had no idea how that was going to look years ago. But when God called us to plant this church, it all clicked and made sense. That now, with the church plant coming, and now with the church now being established and having, you know, all the proper channels taken care of and having proper structure and proper leadership and proper government and proper accountability in place, that it can now become what Focus had envisioned a church to be, which was to be an extension of the church on the campus, but then more importantly, a place that students can now come outside of Focus on a Sunday morning and be connected outside of Focus. So like some of us in here, like you legitimately don't have a church. Like if I was to ask you, like, yo, who's your pastor? You probably would name a pastor, but then I would ask you the second question, how well does your pastor know you? It's tough. How well do you know your pastor? I would ask you that question. Right? Like if they don't know you, at least by a first name basis, then they don't know you. I mean, let's call it what it is. They don't know you. Right? So like, I mean, how can I be shepherded by somebody that don't know me? Not at all. And it's not necessarily saying that your pastor got to know everybody. That's not my point. My point is that there should be some avenue in the church where you're connected and accountable to and accounted for. So even if the pastor doesn't necessarily know who you are, somebody should, that's in leadership. Somebody should be able to pour into your life. Somebody should be able to talk to you if you need to go talk to them and get some wisdom and some insight into. That's the benefit of being connected to a local church that a lot of times we don't get. Now, through the years, people have always kind of considered Focus to be like their church. I asked people like before, like, what church you go to? I don't go to church. Focus is my church. That's good, but you do know Focus is going to be done come May and December. So what's going to happen in these off months? You just going to fall into sin and then get back right? I mean, what's going to happen? Like, you need to be connected somewhere so you can grow, you know what I mean? And so that was the whole vision of Focus, that at some point Focus would be connected to the local church. And so with that being said, so what it looks like now is as our church is starting and as our church is launching in Hampton, which I'm super excited about, starting in September when we have our first worship services on Sunday, September 21st, Focus now will become the campus extension of the Bridge Church. And it's not just here at ODU. The goal was always to have a campus presence on all the campuses around the 757 area code. So the church has campus presence at Norfolk State. Them Spartans need it bad. Y'all need it too, right? We need it here too, right? HU, they sure enough need it bad, right? I don't even know if there is any campus ministries over there. Well, I think there is one, but they don't really do nothing at all. Yeah, then they have like a chapel service. But nobody really goes to that. So, I mean, it's a lack there. Christopher Newport University, some of you guys may be familiar with that. They need more campus presence. They have a little bit of campus ministry presence, which is great. Some cats are really faithful. But, I mean, we got thousands of students. Can't no one ministry reach everybody. That's just crazy to think. Then you have, like, Thomas Nelson Community College. You got TCC. You know what I'm saying? And so the goal was that Focus would always become the campus extension of a church on multiple campuses all throughout 757. And here's why this is important. Because it started here. Like what happens here now begins to spread to all the other campuses. You are part of some serious history. Like I don't even think you guys probably recognize it because some of us are new, which is cool, not a problem, glad you're here. But the history of Focus is amazing. You're talking about a ministry that started as a radio show, WOD radio, where like an average 2 people watch a day, something like that, right? It started like that. And then all of a sudden, little by little, like people started to watch the show, and then we started Bible study, and then all of a sudden, we had like 10 people in Bible study, we had some chairs like this, we had a little boom box, and we had people line dancing in the joint, you know what I'm saying? And then 10 turned into like 12, and then 12 turned into 13, and we're like, oh snap, we growing like a boy. And then 13 went to like 15, and all of a sudden this Richmond room, which seated like 30 people, at first seemed very big, now begins to feel very small. Next thing you know, we're having to look for another room in Web Center. And it just continues to grow and continues to grow and continues to grow. So we go from like every room in Web Center. We went from Richmond room to Cape Charles and Isle of Wight room to Potomac and York room. We went to the Williamsburg room. We went to Hampton Newport News room. We went to the Williamsburg room. We went to like every room in Web Center. Rabbi Rec room. We were like everywhere. And we didn't even know what that was. We were like, what? What is that? Rabbi, who is Rec? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is this? And so we were like everywhere, man. And then it just got to the point where we were like, yo, there's not enough room in Web Center anymore for us. Because the only spot that we could use was North Cab, but y'all know how North Cab is. There's always something going on in North Cab. And so we had to figure out something else. And so then the opportunity opened up for us to be in MGB. And so we were in MGB 101, or 102 rather, where they show all the movies and all that type of stuff on Friday nights. You know, the movies that everybody wanted to see but didn't have no money to see during the summertime, but they show it to you for free because you're a student, that type of stuff. And even though it's not just like it's for students, but you have people from the community who actually come and see the movie even though it's only for students. Crazy, right? Like a lot of parents be bringing their kids, let's go to the movies. All right, cool, where we going? ODU. What? Right? I mean, it's so funny, man. But I'm getting off track. But so we ended up in that room. And it was amazing because we would see like hundreds of people in the joint. Like, I mean, at one point we were hitting like 170 people on a Tuesday night. Like, this may look like a lot of people right now. It's not a whole lot of people. It seems like it, but it's not. But you got so much history that you are a part of. It is ridiculous. Like, serious. I wish we could bring a good amount of people from like old school focus days, man, to just kind of tell you like, yo, God changed my life through this ministry. Like, I was going down the wrong path prior to me being connected to this. The Lord led me here, and it changed my life. I've said it countless times. We've seen people get married. We got cats popping out kids now who started here, and they married. Like God has done amazing things in the lives of people. We've seen great relationships get birth, friendships, lifelong get birth, man. We've seen amazing things. We've seen our fair share of crazy things too, just like anybody else. I'm talking crazy. Crazy. Like in the middle of the teaching, you know, somebody just decided they want to be filled by the Spirit. And, yeah! Oh, okay. Amen. Right? I mean, like, crazy stuff, man. We've been in TNT, and the cops would come out of nowhere, like, or the custodial staff, like, y'all need to go ahead and close this up because y'all didn't have this room. Don't you see we here right now? You know what I'm saying? Like that type of stuff. Like, we've seen everything, man. But through it all, God's been faithful. Ministry's still here, years later. 8 years ago. We've seen ministry start and stop in 8, 9 years' time. But yet, for some reason, this ministry that started off as a radio show is still here. Because it all goes back to legacy. It all goes back to people who stepped outside of themselves for a moment and recognized that this is not just something for now, but this is something that's going to last for years to come. That's the vision of Focus. That's the vision of the church. And so now with Focus becoming a part of the church, Focus is going to have even more impact on other campuses and even a greater impact here on this campus. And that's why I'm so excited, man. I'm so excited because it allows the church to be able to do what the church is supposed to be, the legs and feet, and being mobile, being on different campuses all around the area, having a presence in Norfolk, Hampton, Chesapeake, Newport News, whatever the case may be, man. And so my prayer is that as you continue to go throughout your college years, that you would look at your life from the lens of legacy. That you won't just take your life for granted. That you won't take the gifts that God has put on the inside of you. That you won't take the experiences that the Lord has allowed you to have for granted, but rather you would appreciate them and ask God to give you clarity and wisdom and discernment as to what He wants to do through those things. So, with that being said, this is now a campus extension of the Bridge Church that we are starting in September. If you are looking for a church and you have not found a church, we would love to have you become a part of the church. If you want to talk to me more about it after TNT is done, I would love to talk to you more about it. We got business cards. I got some business cards I can give to you with our website. You can go to our website, thebridgechurchva.com, and on that website, you'll see all the information that you need to know. Whether it's when stuff will start up, the vision of the church, a little bit about myself and my wife, how you can get plugged in. Maybe you already have a church, you don't necessarily want to be a part, but you want to know how you can support in other ways, whether that's through praying, whether that's through financially supporting the church, and everything like that. Or maybe you actually want to be a part of the team of people who help launch this church. We call that our launch team. And these people help cast vision. These people are really kind of the legs and feet of the church. And so if you want to be a part, and you want to join the team, you can go to our website, thebridgechurchva.com. You can come holler at me as soon as TNT is done. Like, yo, I want to be a part of the church. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I feel the Lord leading me to do this. We would love to have you. And so as the semester rolls on, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll share more vision about the church, so that way, if there's any questions, you can continue to ask them and continue to talk to me. I have no problem answering questions at all, as long as they're at the right time, you know, not like in the middle of worship, like, you know, we're singing Christ alone, cornerstone. Hey, so when does services start? Well, not tonight. You know what I'm saying? But definitely, like, I would love to talk to you about it, man. And our church is focused on just being a multi-generational, a multicultural church. So you have a church that is full of children, students, seniors, couples, college students, different races, different ethnicities. Our church does not cater to any particular group. Our church is a church that is for literally everybody. Like I will be preaching in an attire like this. I will never have, well, I'm not gonna say I never have a suit, but more often than not, 99% of the times, I probably won't even preach in a suit. I'll probably come with some Jordans, some jeans, and a t-shirt. Some people will be like, you're not a pastor. I think sometimes I'm not because of how I dress. But the Lord has called me to do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, so nonetheless, man, like, our church is not big on tradition. Our church is not going to be huge on having all of these different type of things that you got to go through, man. We just like, hey, if you want to be a part and you want to know Jesus, and you want to get closer to Christ, and you want to help other people know Jesus, come join church. If you're not big on all that other stuff, man, that gets people all hung up and like, I don't want to be a part of the church because they saw me wearing a skirt and they said, you're going to hell because you're wearing a skirt. No, we say, hey, you want to wear a skirt, that's cool, long as it's not too short. We want people to see Jesus, not all of you. Right? Like, it's cool. Like, be who you are. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you come wearing a hat. I don't care if you come wearing some ugly-looking Redskins Cowboys jerseys and I'm an Eagles fan. I do not care. We might actually vote to have you put out the church because of stuff like that. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. Please do not take it seriously. I was just joking. But legitimately, like, yo, we just want you to just come be who you are, man. Like, for real. There's not going to be no spooky, crazy stuff going on, man. You don't have to worry about people putting you on the spot like I'm preaching. Like, hey, you're new? Stand up and introduce yourself to everybody. Don't clap it up for them, the new person. You think they're coming back? Probably not. Probably not. We're not gonna do stuff like that, man. Like, for real. Worship set. You come in during the Sunday morning service, like, the music is blasting. You probably can actually hear it like outside the street. We'll probably have earplugs for some of the seniors, you know, because maybe a little too loud. Maybe even some of us, some of y'all like, man, I don't care nothing about that loud racket noise. Tell me when worship is done, because I ain't got time for that. I just want to hit work. Okay, that's fine, cool, whatever. But you'll come in, you'll come into the parking lot, man. You have some crazy people outside who are like super duper energetic. Welcome to the Bridge Church. I mean, it probably won't be like that, but I'm just kind of giving you an example, right? Like, they'll be super excited to see you. You'll be like, man, am I going to a concert or what? Like the whole atmosphere is different. The whole atmosphere is dynamic. You come in, man. Lights are dark. Only thing that's lit up is the stage. So that way, all you see is what's in front of you. And that's all everybody else sees. The attention is not on each other. The attention is on Jesus Christ. And then on top of that, like, when the message comes, the message is only for like a few minutes. It's not like 2-3 hours at all. Like, you can come in, you can enjoy service, and then at the same time, as soon as service is done, you can go out, man, you can go to IHOP, you can go back home, go to sleep, do your homework, whatever the case may be. You have plenty of time to do that. But most of all, I think the biggest thing that's going to be really cool about the Bridge Church is it is a church where you can feel comfortable to invite whoever you want. And I don't know about you, there's been plenty of times when I grew up and I went to certain churches and I was like, yo, I can't take them here. It's kind of crazy. We don't want that. Like, we want you to feel comfortable to bring whoever you want. Like, if Cash just came from the club, bring them. Like, if they drunk and can't even stand up, bring them. Who cares? Like, seriously, like, just come. Just be a part, man. That's the thing that we want to see. That's the type of church that we want to be. Like, a church that reaches people and sees people reconciled to God and becomes a follower of Christ. So if that's your desire, you want to talk more about it, come holler at me as soon as tonight is done. And the great news about it, as I said earlier, is Focus now is attached to this, and Focus is part of this. Just because you're a part of Focus does not mean you have to be a part of the Bridge Church. Anybody who thinks that, like, that is not what I'm saying. But what this simply means is that now Focus is now backed by something greater than itself. In other words, it has something that is connected to that's greater than itself. Greater resources, greater opportunities, greater support, greater help. That's the only way things can really actually survive. That it has to be connected to something greater than itself. So I hope that makes sense and that it connects and maybe it kind of sparks some things and plants some seeds. So with that being said, 1 Timothy or 2 Timothy chapter 1. 2 Timothy chapter 1. And tonight, just in case some of you guys are like, oh snap, it's 8:25, he hasn't gotten to his message yet. I did it on purpose. Our message is not even going to be that long. It really kind of goes in and picks right up off of the stuff that I just kind of mentioned about leaving a legacy. And so I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the importance of this. And my prayer is that God would turn and churn our hearts to begin to think about, from his perspective, what he wants to do through our lives. So 2 Timothy 1. Beginning of verse 3, this is what it says. I thank God whom I serve, as my forefathers did. As my forefathers did. With a clear conscience, as night and day, I constantly remember you in my prayers. Recalling your tears, I long to see you, so that I may be filled with joy. Verse 5, I have been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother, Lois, and in your mother, Eunice. And I am persuaded now lives in you. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. Verse 3 again, I thank God whom I serve, as my forefathers did. Verse 5, I have been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother, Lois, and in your mother, Eunice. And I am now persuaded that now lives in you also. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. If you're taking notes, this is a great place to go ahead and write the title down. The title of tonight's message is Then, Now, Later. Then, Now, Later. Acronym, I guess you can use T and L. T, then, N, now, L, later. Then, now, later. Then, now, later. Legacy. Everybody say legacy. 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 The one thing that you and I should be living our lives for on a regular basis is not for ourselves. Like, we are not called, God did not create us to live for ourselves. I know that's countercultural and that's counterintuitive to what society teaches, because society teaches that you should do everything for yourself. Society says make the money for yourself. Society says date the person that you want to date. Society says buy the car that you want to buy. What Jesus says is this. He says any person, in Luke 9 he says like this, any person who lays his life down for my sake will save his life. But anybody, essentially, who lives for themselves will lose their life. Then he says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul? In other words, Jesus is saying, if you and I only live for ourselves, we will miss out on all the great things that God has for us. Plain language, if you live for me, myself, and I, you will be frustrated. You will be confused. You will seem as if your life is always in a holding pattern, which simply means it is going in the same direction all the time. It's like a revolving door with no entrance and no exit in sight. It's in a crazy cycle of deterioration. But Jesus says this. He says, if you lay your life down for me, you will find it. You will gain it. It's the difference between what culture says and what Christ says. What Christ is more about is leaving a legacy. What culture is all about is living right now. Enjoy the moment. How many times have we heard people say that? Just enjoy the moment. Don't think about tomorrow. And to an extent, that's true. Jesus did say, don't worry about tomorrow. But the caveat was, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and everything else will be added unto you. He says, when you seek after me and my kingdom, you don't have to worry about tomorrow. Not because tomorrow doesn't exist, but because you know I have tomorrow taken care of. The problem is when you and I pursue tomorrow, or when you and I live in a moment outside of Christ, tomorrow is going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Because you're no longer living for Christ, you're living for yourself. But when we talk about then, now, and later, when we talk about legacy, what Jesus wants us to have in mind is not living for today, but living with the end in mind. Tadashi, a Christian rap artist, in his album called The Black Light, he continuously says that theme and communicates that theme all throughout his album. It's a great album. If you don't have it, I would recommend going on YouTube and just listen to the whole thing. It's great. But in one of his songs, he says, I live with the end in mind. The end. What is the end? We don't know what the end is. But what we do know is that there will be an end. And if there's an end and it's not here, then that means it's coming. That implies legacy. That's later. And so I have now, in my situation that I am in right now, where you are right now in your life as a junior, as a senior, as a sophomore, as a graduate student, whatever the case may be, your situation right now in your relationship with somebody else, your situation right now where you're on the brink of graduating and now you're trying to figure out where you're going to be after graduation is done. That is later. But a lot of what happens now impacts later. And not only does now impact later, but then, back in the day, all that type of stuff, has an impact on now. Because what happened yesterday does, to an extent, influence today. It may not necessarily determine the outcome of today. It may not necessarily say that because this happened yesterday, that this is going to happen today. But no, what that implies is that there is history there. And some of us can identify with that. Because like when you look over your life, it could have been good, it could have been bad. Some of us have been through some really crazy, like, horror stories. Like, I'm talking like crazy, worse than Paranormal Activity. 1, 2, 3, 4, Affinity. However many more they're gonna make until people just realize, like, yo, it's not scary anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like you have some crazy past experiences that you come through. Some of us come through heartbreaks. Some of us have dealt with people leaving us who said that they would always be there for us. Some of us deal with people who neglected us, people who should have cared about us and nurtured us. Maybe that was a parent, maybe that was a father, maybe that was a mother, and then they just kind of walked out on you. Or maybe your parents split up, they divorced. Or maybe you had a great past. Maybe you got a great history. Not perfect, but it was pretty fair by most people's standards. You had both parents in the household. They supported you, they loved you, they cared for you. Even when you were a knucklehead and didn't realize it and were bucking against them, they were still there, they loved you. Bless God for that. But all of us have a then. All of us, whether it was good, bad, ugly, happy, sad, all of us have a then. And what we must be conscious of is then does play a role in now. And now does play a role in later. How many of you guys have ever had the candy now later? Show hands. Now laters. Right. Like, now laters are pretty cool. I mean, they're not better than like Skittles, Wildberry, but they're pretty alright, right? Right? And what's the whole concept behind now laters? That it's like, it's here now, then it'll be here later. Like this joint, like, lasts for a long time. Unless you just bite into it and tear your teeth all up. Which then it's like, so they can pull them all out, you know what I'm saying? Like, but nonetheless, the concept is, it's continuous. There's some continuity here. And the one thing that the Lord wants you and I to have in mind is, listen, your life, it is short, it is just a vapor, but it can make a profound impact if used properly. But before you can make a profound impact, you first have to be impacted yourself. In other words, I can't be a good influence on somebody else if I have not had a good influence on me. I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying that you have to have everybody in your life who loves you and mentors you and you had great examples. No, not at all. But I had to be impacted by something that was greater than me, something that would alter the direction of my life in the godly way, in a positive way, in order for me to be able to have the godly impact on other people. Then, now, and later. So now when you talk about legacy, a lot of times when we talk about legacy, people sometimes go to think about money, inheritance, like goods and riches and houses. You know, parents say, I'm leaving my legacy. This is all going to be yours. I'm working for you. I'm working for you. Well, give it to me now. No, you can't have it now. but this is for you. Some of your parents have said that to you. Like when you get to a certain age, I got this trust fund, and when you hit 55, that junk is going, it's going to kick in. You're going to love it. Why can't I just love it now, right? Because what they're implying is that it's a legacy. Because if I were to give it to you now, you might blow it all right now, right? You go back to Luke 15, the parable of the lost son. And as the lost son, the prodigal son, as we may know him as, he went to his dad. He asked for his inheritance. The inheritance is not supposed to come until Pop dies. It's pretty much when he went to his pop, he was like, listen, man, you're good as dead to me, so just give me the money. I just want to go do my own thing. Right? He asked for his legacy premature. Legacy is designed not just for now, but also for later. And the best legacies are those that are able to be passed from one generation on to another, right? So all of us in here prayerfully, like you'll graduate, you'll get a degree, you'll walk across the stage. So now the question is, What legacy will you have left at ODU when you walk across that stage? Now, I know that's hard to think about when you walk across the stage because all you have is this euphoric type emotion. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad ODU is done. They took $1 million from me, and I'm so glad that I don't have to go to class anymore with that crazy professor, and all they do is talk about themselves, and every time I go to get some help, they're no longer there. Like, I'm glad that this season of my life is done. You can have that mentality. Or you can have the mentality like how is my campus? How are my roommates? How are my classmates? How is the person that I see in the weight room every day? How is the person that I see in the workout room every day? How will they be impacted by my life? Are people's lives better because of me? Are they worse because of me? Or maybe even the worst of all, are they neutral because of me? There was no movement. There was no growth. It just kind of stayed where they were. It's the worst position. That's your legacy. So like when you graduate from ODU, when you leave here, or maybe you don't even graduate, maybe like, you know, God just does something crazy, which I don't know. But when you are done with this season here, if somebody were to write a biographical sketch about your life at ODU, how would it read? Here's such and such. Great student, but never had time for anybody. Or here's such and such. The life of the party. Twerker of the year. That's a real reality. I mean, there's some people out here that's like twerkaholics. I mean, let's just be real. You know what I'm saying? Like if there was a competition, you get the big trophy. You are inventing things that have never been done before, right? Like how will your student obituary read? How will it read? Like if there was to be a newspaper article, not because you died, but because you graduated, how would it read in those timelines? Would it be good things to say? Would it be bad things to say? Would somebody be able to say, you know what, this person led like 5 people to Christ, which then impacted other people's families, which then impacted their campus? Would people be able to say this person was the kindest person, the nicest person you would ever meet? Would they be able to say that this person was one who always went out their way, they sacrificed for people, they prayed with people, they loved on people, they encouraged people? Like how will your life read when you're done as a student? And I think the reason why this is so important is because a lot of times we don't necessarily think about those things. Like you're just thinking about, hey, I want that paper. Old Dominion University, class of such and such, give me that. I don't care nothing about nothing else. And because we get so tunnel-minded, we blot out everything else around us. So you get to the finish line, but everybody around you doesn't. And so you looking like, hey, where's everybody else? Oh, you left them. When they were asking you for help, you were just all consumed with yourself. Like they asked you for help with that class assignment, because that was the last assignment they needed to graduate on time. She's like, ain't nobody got time for that. You just did your own thing. Now, you gotta stay another semester, another $1,000, $6,000 down. Right? Legacy. How will your legacy read? Like, what will people remember you as when it's all said and done? You know what I'm saying? Like when people look at your Facebook profile after you graduate, what would be one of the first things that pops in their mind? Oh my gosh, wow. Man, that dude was off the chain. Man, she was kind of reckless with her stuff. Man, she had the worst mouth. She was a flirt. She flirted with everybody. My goodness. What will be, like when people see your picture, what will be some of the first things that pop in their mind? Will it be a good thing? Will it be a bad thing? But here's the greatest thing. The best legacy that you and I can pass on, the best legacy that you and I can pass on to somebody. If you're listening, I want you to listen good. The best legacy that you and I can pass on is that of the Christian faith. That's the best gift you can give anybody. The best gift. You may not have a whole lot of money. You may got like one oodles and noodle, something like that. You may have like a few flex points. But the best gift you can give anybody is to introduce them to Jesus. That's the best gift. Because this gift never runs out of style. This gift is the gift that keeps on giving. This gift is the gift that gets better with time, it seems like. That's the best gift and the best legacy you can leave in somebody's life. That's the best imprint that you can leave. But if we're not careful and intentional, instead of giving something like this in Judges 2, verses 10 to 11, it says, after the whole generation had been gathered up to their fathers, this is just fancy for saying after the whole generation had died, another generation grew up, kids, who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. What did they do? They did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and they served the Baals. That is one of the most sobering scriptures in all of Scripture. That a generation rose up that did not know the Lord. Whose fault is that? The previous generation. Y'all were so caught up with going to heaven, you forgot about these little jokers right here. Like, I'm so caught up with the Lord. Oh my gosh, I'm just so consumed by his presence. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong. Oh my gosh. But in the meantime, the rest of everybody in my dorm is going to hell. Right? Like, do your roommates even know you're in Bible study right now? Where you been, girl? Oh, you know, man, I was at the library studying. I mean, I got this exam. You ain't never studied a day in your life. Come on, let's be real. Where were you at? Right? Yo, dude, where were you at, man? You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, we thought you were gonna come through and hang out with us at, you know, such and such and such and such. Yeah, man. You know, I had an appointment, you know, with the doctor. You had a doctor's appointment at 7:30. Yeah, he's a great doctor. You know, I had this appointment with, you know, Dr. J, we call him. Right? You don't say Jesus, you just say Dr. J. It's like, okay, weird, but okay, cool. But they never know. One of the things that God convicted me about, you know, as we're kind of in this whole journey of planting the church, you know, super excited, like, man, we want to tell people about Jesus, and man, we want to let people know about the church, and man, we want to let people know you can be a part of the church. And God was like, yeah, man, this is all great. But if your neighbors don't even know that you're a pastor, do you really think you're making an impact? It's like, bust me in the mouth and the chest at the same time. Like, seriously. Like, your neighbors are real cool, man. Like, he's real cool. He does a lot of stuff, man. He helps you shovel snow. Right? Y'all both Philadelphia Eagles fans. I done gave you all the components. I've given you all the context clues to minister to him. But if you would have moved, and then he would have been like, oh, snap, I didn't know Ed was a pastor. I only lived by him for 5 years. You know what that says to me? You know what the Lord is probably, not the Lord, but you know what that says on paper? Dude, you suck as a Christian witness. Like, you lived next to somebody for 5-some years, and you never brought Jesus up in conversation, and you claim to follow Christ? You are a hypocrite. And you need to repent, dude. You call yourself a pastor, but the people around you don't even know you one? That's kind of bad. But yet you say, oh, you're not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But you ain't even tell your neighbor. Y'all share a fence together and everything. You ain't even tell them. Right? Y'all done help each other in the yard, but Jesus ain't never came up with a conversation. Right? And before you look at me with this self-righteous eye, right? I'm convicted. I'm terrible. I'm a sinner. I need grace, right? All that good stuff. But look at your own life. Do people around you feel your impact? Like when people come around you, like, not do they tremble, but do they kind of like almost straighten up a little bit? Like, oh snap, here they come. Yo, hide that weed, dog. What you doing? Put that drink out. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is that? Put the bottles away, dog. Put them away. All this stuff away. You know he'll drink. Hey, what's up, man? God bless you, brother. Right? Like, is there an impact there? Like, do they feel the presence of God when you come around? Not because you go up waving a Bible saying, you drink, you need Jesus. You know how you make the face? You need Jesus. Right? No, not because you do that, but just because you're so kind to him. Yo, what's up, man? How you doing? Oh, you got a bottle? How'd it been treating you? Man, what's that, like 8 bottles? Dang, man, you going for the record today? I mean, you say it in a joking way, but you're not condemning them? You know what I'm saying? Like, do they feel loved when you come around, or do they feel condemned? Or do they feel anything at all? It's about leaving a legacy, man. Like, years from now, your roommate, you want your roommates to say, man, yo, you really impacted me. Like, you really had an impact on me. I know I was tripping back then. I know I was like, man, bump Jesus. I don't want to have nothing to do with them. But I want you to know that you planted a lot of seeds in me. And I'm not saying this because this is experimental. I'm saying this because this is for real. Being transparent, I had a friend of mine, former roommate. His name was H. People called him H. H was super duper cool. H was a baller. He, as a matter of fact, was from Arizona, where I was born, which was interesting. And we were roommates at the time. And, you know, H was just super duper cool. And H was kind of like this philosopher, right? Like, H had some real deep thoughts. He'd be like, yo, Ed. That's how he talk. Yo, Ed. If he watches this, he's going to kill me. But, yo, Ed, what's up, man? Yo, what you think about this? Like, Jesus? I got you. He would never make, you gonna get saved today? Oh, I'm chilling. Yo, hey, you want ball today? Cool, let's go. Right. And our conversations were always like that. They were always like that. I am not exaggerating. They were always like that. Do you know that this dude sent me a Facebook message about a month ago? It was like, yo, Ed, real talk, man. Like, if I know anybody who's in need of a church in that area, I'm pointing them directly to you. Because through the years, you made an impact on me. I know we didn't always see eye to eye on things, man, but you were one of the most down-to-earth Christians I've ever met in my life. You know that shit almost made me cry. And I'm not boasting in myself. I'm boasting in what God does when we're obedient to Him. Like when we focus on leaving a legacy the way He's called us to, you do not know the impact that you are having on people's lives. It may not seem like it. You may be frustrated. You may be going to this person. You may be praying for this person. And it may seem like there is nothing happening on the surface. God is doing a miraculous work in them, and you may not see it right now. You may not see it years from now. You may not see it at all. But trust and believe that God is working. And He calls you now to continue to be faithful. Don't think that your life is just for you. Your life is so that others may come to know Christ. That's ultimately what it's about. That's what Paul meant here when he was talking about, I did it as my forefathers did it. Like my forefathers set an example. And so now I'm ultimately following an example. As a believer, if you're truly a follower of Christ, this is not for those, if you're not saved, that's cool. But if you're a follower of Christ, that means you are in the business of leaving a legacy. Jesus said it like this in Matthew 28, go make disciples. Imagine if the disciples would not have obeyed that command. Do you think we would be here? No. What if they were like, man, a disciple? Man, bump that, Jesus. We good. Like, we just going to enjoy this whole Pentecostal movement right now. The Spirit has come down on us. And we're just going to love it. No, they had an urgency because they understood generationally what Jesus could do for people. Because they said, if we come to repentance and we have experienced this everlasting life, we understand that other people need the gospel as well. So we're going to live this life. Here's a few points about leaving a legacy. I got 2 points tonight, and that's it. A few points about leaving a legacy. Point number 1. Here's what I want you to understand. Listen to me loud and clear. It may have started with you, but it must outlive you. It may have started with you, but it must outlive you. Verse 5. Notice what Paul says to Timothy. Paul's writing to Timothy. Timothy is like his spiritual son. Timothy had a dad, but more than likely his dad wasn't saved, didn't pass on any faith. But notice what he says here. I've been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother, Lois, and in your mother, Eunice. Timothy's faith did not start with him. In other words, Timothy wasn't the first person in his family to get saved. His grandmother was. But then what did she do? She passed it on to her daughter. And then what did she do? She passed it on to her son named Timothy. And what did Timothy do? Timothy then began to pass it on to other people. I may be doing something that has never been done before. You may be saved. You may be following Christ. You may be the first person in your family that's saved. I'm talking like there's everybody else in your family, like nobody knows the Lord. Nobody is a Jesus follower. Nobody is a Christian. Nobody is a follower of Christ. You may be the one who has broken the mold. That is awesome. God is doing a marvelous work in you. But understand this, it cannot stop with you. It must outlive you. Just as the Christian faith began with Jesus, He entrusted it to the faithful men, the disciples, to carry it forth generation after generation. John 14:12, Jesus says it like this, I tell you the truth, anyone who has faith in me will do what I've been doing. He will do even greater things than these because I am going to the Father. He will do even greater things. Greater things. Everybody say greater. Greater things. He's talking about you. He's talking about me. He's talking about the people who come after us. He's talking about the people who came after Him. You will do greater things. Do you know that the disciples would be foaming at the mouth if they had the internet back then? The internet? We know about this net that Jesus cast down, but the internet? I mean, I can talk to people who are in Canada and I'm in Jerusalem? Oh my gosh. You have a what? An airplane? What is that? It flies over water and you get to a place in a few hours? Let's go. That's all we needed. We thought a boat was the biggest message to get out. You can send a message to somebody in just a few minutes. What? The disciples wish they had this stuff back then. I can't even imagine what they would have done. But you know what? I think God was intentional with that. Because that's why He placed you and I in this generation. to utilize the resources that God has created and given us to be able to advance his kingdom. That's the greater works. Genesis 1:28, it says this: God told them to be fruitful and multiply. God is always in the business of generational legacy. Always. Like, it's good for you and your Christian friends to hang out, but how many more Christian friends are you making? I'm not talking about like they're Christian, hey, we're friends now. No, I'm talking about how many Christians are you making out of non-Christians? What are you doing? Are you sharing your faith? You and I are either consumers or conduits. Consumer just takes it all in for themselves. A conduit now just becomes a channel in which everything flows. You and I can decide today, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a consumer, or do you want to be a conduit? Are you all about yourself, or are you all about seeing others come to know Christ? So in other words, what am I doing right now that will set people up who are coming after me? Your family, like your little cousin, they are a terror. There's a reason for that. It's called the sinful world. And the only one who will keep them from becoming just being a terror to turning into a terrorist is Jesus. You have Jesus. Oh, isn't that interesting? Go tell them about it. Like, it may be cute right now that he tearing down blocks and tearing down this and tearing down that. Oh, he's so cute. Look how he destroys everything. 30 years from now, when you tear down a building, it's not so cute anymore, huh? They need Jesus. Your family, the ones who are drunk all the time, the ones who like abuse you when you were growing up, the ones who talk down to you, the ones who belittles you, the one who abandoned you, the one who broke your heart, they need Christ. I think last week, my wife and I, we shared just how even though we had a lot of brokenness take place in our family, we've seen in the past few years that as we continue to be obedient to God, especially as when we got married, we've seen God reconcile family members to himself. That is not by accident. That is by the design of God. God says, listen, if you test me in this, if you obey this, and if you are faithful with this task, you will see me do the incredible in your life, man. Why wouldn't you want to see your families off of crack? Why wouldn't you want to see your roommates no longer thinking that they have to go to a web jam to feel whole? Why wouldn't you no longer want your friends to think that they don't have to have sex anymore in order to feel complete? Like, you have the good news. You have the greatest news. You have the greatest message that this world needs to hear. But the reality is the world will never hear it as long as it stays with you and I. You have the greatest news. And the greatest news is that Jesus is alive. That he came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. He did not come to make you a slave. He came to free you. He has a plan. He has a hope for you. You have the greatest news. If you're really a Jesus follower and you really love Christ, tell somebody about him. Make sure that even though it may have started with you, that it doesn't end with you, or it may have started with you, but it must outlive you. Here's the second point. It may not have started with you, but it cannot end with you. It may not have started with you, but it cannot end with you. Some of us are thinking like, oh, that's the same thing as the first one. No, it's not. Because some of us may have been the first ones to get saved. That's great, but now it must outlive us. Some of us in here, you come from a background that is Christian. Your parents were Christian. Your grandparents were Christian. That's awesome. But had they not been diligent in passing on the legacy to you, then you would not be here right now. So now, because they passed it on to you, what you must do is now pass it on to someone else. That's what it's all about. Verse 5, he says, I'm persuaded that this faith now lives in you. For this reason, I remind you to fan in the flame the gift of God, which is in you, through the laying on of my hands. That's what Paul's saying. He says, because you have this faith, fan in the flame. Use your gift to be able to reach more people. Use your gift to be able to tell more people about Christ. Use your life as an instrument, as an influence to impact the lives of people. Jesus is like this in Matthew 5, that you are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. He says, let your light so shine so people may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:14, that's what he's talking about there. He says, listen, live your life in such a way that people see me. Because when that happens, you begin to continue on the Christian legacy. It will be amazing that all of your roommates who you started off the year not liking, they come to know the Lord by the end of the year. That is a great thing, man. Because you know what happens now? Now they carry that message, and now they go do the same for somebody else. It is so much bigger than you. It is so much bigger than me. 2 Timothy 1:3, going back to that first verse that we read, Paul says like this, I thank God whom I serve, as my forefathers did, with a clear conscience, as night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. What did Paul realize? Paul realized that his faith didn't begin with him. And he also realized that his faith could not die with him, but he had to pass it on. And he passes it on to faithful people like Timothy, like Titus, Barnabas, other people who walked with him in ministry. He passed it on. So the question I want to ask you and I today, a real hard question, is this: who am I discipling right now? Who are you mentoring? Like who out of all your friends on Facebook, you got 1 million followers on Twitter, that's awesome, right? How many people in your phone book? That's cool. You got a lot of people in your phone book. But who can you honestly say, I'm discipling them, I'm praying for them day in, day out. I'm text messaging them, seeing how they're doing, I'm calling them, I'm having some really in-depth conversations, not shallow ones, like, hey, how was your day? Oh, okay, cool. How was class? Oh, okay, cool. Where are you going tonight? Oh, okay, cool. Talk to you later. That's shallow. No substance. Substance-filled conversations go like this. Hey, how's it going? It's going good. Great. You gonna tell me what's going on? For real? Because that fake stuff is fake. I don't want to hear it. What's going on with your relationship? Oh, you know, we struggling. Oh, that means y'all doing stuff y'all shouldn't be doing. The tough questions. Yeah, that's discipleship. Discipleship is confronting the things that you and I don't want to confront. But who am I doing that for? And I'm not saying that you go condemning the person that you may be mentoring. No. But who are you pouring your life into? Like who will be able to say that my life is the better because such and such came into my life? Who can say that about you? Who can say that about me? And if there's nobody who can say that, and if you don't even have an idea of anybody who can say that, then what that probably means is that you and I may be only living for ourselves right now. I say that with all humility. I say that with all grace. It pains me to say it, but it's the honest to God truth. Maybe you and I are only living for ourselves. Are you pouring out your life right now? God has not called us to extinguish legacy. He's called us to extend legacy. Not extinguish, not eliminate, but to extend it. So the things that God has taught you in time, that's awesome. But who are you now passing that on to? Like the revelation that you got, you were in your Devo time and you were worshiping the Hillsong, William McDowell, whoever, and God just spoke. I'm talking like he opened up the windows of heaven and just everything just went crazy. Like you went black, you passed out, and the Lord just knocked you out, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this was the best worship experience ever, and God just spoke so many great things to me. I'm writing all this stuff down. That's great, but who would know that you wrote it down? Like this revelation, does it stop with you, or does it continue on with somebody else? That's a question I'm going to ask us. Who is the legacy for you? Like who is that person? Like what will the things that God has taught you and I, and who is that living on in right now? Like right now. Think about it. And I know some of our thoughts is like this. It's like, but I'm not good enough to be a mentor right now. I'm not all together to disciple anybody. Do you think that the disciples had it all together when Jesus told them to make disciples? Mind you, Peter just denied him 3 times. Mind you, Judas just betrayed him. But yet he entrusts this. You don't have to be perfect to lead somebody to Christ. You don't have to have it all together. But you know what I've come to find out? When you're conscious that you have other people who are following you, it somehow begins to kind of get you in check. You don't do everything that you used to do no more. Because now you know you got a life attached to you. Right? So now I'll use my son for example. I got a 11-month-old son. He's about to be a year old. Like there are certain things that you know I could do just on my own, you know, and not have to worry about anybody else coming up behind me. So like, you know, I could go touch the outlet and plug something in and all that type of stuff and not have to worry about anything. I gotta be worried about that Jake now. Because like he sees me put it in and put my hand over there. He's like, oh snap, Daddy did it. Let me go do it. No, now I gotta be real conscious about how I do things. So even though I may still like put stuff in the outlet, I gotta be strategic in how I do it. Such is the same now when you have people that are following you. It doesn't mean that you have to be perfect, but what it should mean is that you acknowledge that Christ is perfecting you, and that as he's perfecting you, you're pouring out your life into the lives of other people. I'm not calling you to be no mentor. That's not what I'm calling you to do. That's not what I'm asking you to do. That's not what God calls you to do. Mentorship, that's great. Discipleship is the goal. Who is becoming a Christian as a result of being connected to you. You know, I used to always think like when I was growing up, God, I only want Christian friends. Like, bad company corrupts good character. I can't hang out with sinners. They'll contaminate me. Like, no, I don't want a roommate who just drinks all the time. I don't want that. That liquor is just going to mess up my spirit. No, I want some saved brothers. We can just pray together and da-da-da-da-da. Do you not know that the Lord just messed them plans all up? That God would strategically place me around people that he wanted to reach. But I couldn't recognize it because I was being so selfish. And it wasn't until God really kind of broke me down that I realized, you know what, God, I've been really selfish. I need to repent. Because you didn't save me for myself. You saved me so that way other people would know you. You did this work in me so that my family would come to know you. That's what it's about. That's what your life is about. That's what legacy is about. And if you are leaving a legacy, the awesome thing about it is God will be glorified in your life and in the lives of other people. That the next generation that comes after you and me should be better than our generation. That's how it should be. That's outliving our lives properly. So what kind of legacy have I left right now? Like if I were to die right now, what would people say about me? Like what would people say I was, and will people say certain things that were cool or not so cool? Am I living for myself or for the Lord and what he's called me to do? I'll say this and I'm done. With Jesus, it's always been about legacy. Matter of fact, he is the epitome of legacy. Hebrews 13:8 says it like this: Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus is the epitome of what legacy looks like. And he wants you and I to follow suit. Not that we can be Jesus, we can't. Jesus is God, Son of God, God in flesh, the Messiah, second person in the Trinity. I can't be him. But the Lord has called me to be like him, to be like-minded, to have the same desires, to have the same ambitions, to have the same goals, to have the same drive, to see lives transformed by the gospel. That's ultimately what it's about. That's why this ministry is still here 9+ years later. Because it came back to people willing to sacrifice their time, willing to sacrifice their popularity, willing to sacrifice resources, willing to sacrifice a whole lot, just so that 9 years later, you could be here. That's very unselfish. But that's the epitome of the gospel. That's what God has called us to do. So 9 years from now, the question is, will we be able to say, will other people be able to say, you know what, I thank God for the juniors, the seniors, the sophomores, the grad students who were in the oceanography building, 200 on a Tuesday night. I thank God for them. I thank God for those people who served. I thank God for those people who led Bible study. I thank God for those people who sang in Groundbreakers. I thank God for those people who played a hand, because that has helped me to be where I am as a Christian 9+ years later. That's what it's about. In 2023, sounds very far from now, but it's not. It's definitely not. But you play such a huge role in it. And my prayer is that God would continue to show you the value of your life and how it's not just about you, but it's about his will being done in the life of somebody else. That's what it's about. Let's bow. Father, in Jesus'